Hello, I am Eric. This is the Longbox Review comic book podcast, and welcome to a special edition of my Spotlight episodes, where I examine a particular issue, character, or other topics of interest to me. This Spotlight episode is special because it is part of the JS April event. What is JS April, you might ask? Well, during the month of April 2025, the good folks at the Fire and Water Podcast Network have brought together an all-star collection of podcasters and bloggers to celebrate 85 years of the world's first super team, the Justice Society of America. You can visit fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril for a complete list of participants and topics. And also on social media, look for the hashtag JSApril. For my entry in this event, I will be looking at All-Star Comics number 36 and the Five Drowned Men story. So without further ado, let's dive in, shall we? Okay, All-Star Comics number 36. This has a cover date of August-September 1947. The story, Five Drowned Men, is by Robert Kanigher, who is the writer, Erwin Hassan, Lee Elias, Joe Kubert, Frank Harry, and those are the artists. And it was edited by Sheldon Meyer, with a cover by Erwin Hassan. This story was reprinted in DC Special Blue Ribbon Digest number 3 in 1980, which is where I first read this tale. In fact, that digest is one of my favorites because it introduced the multiverse concept to me, both for DC cosmology and just generally what a multiverse is. And it was also reprinted in All-Star Comics Archives Volume 8 in 2002. According to the DC Database Wiki, this is the first published adventure to show Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman working together, which I thought was an interesting piece of comic book history. I did not verify that information, but I'll just take it as is. So let me talk about the cover first, and then I'll get into the story itself. This cover features the JSAers from the story, plus Superman and Batman. Green Lantern is carrying a banner that features the title of the comic book, and Wonder Woman has a banner with the group's name. They look like they're in a parade, or a cavalcade, if you will. And at the top it says, in this issue, Superman and Batman, guest stars. The DC Database Wiki also states this issue was the first All-Star Comics published following the merger of National Comics and All American Comics, forming the publishing company that is known today as DC Comics. From issues 24 to 35, the series was being published solely by All American Comics, and hence the JSA was made up exclusively of their own heroes, which is why the Flash and Green Lantern were brought back to replace the National Comics-owned heroes Spectre and Starman. Superman and Batman's inclusion was likely a nod to the fact that these heroes now all officially belong to one, quote, canon universe. It continues, there is much speculation from comic book historians that the Superman and Batman chapters of this story were actually originally written for the Atom and Johnny Thunder, but that the chapters were redrawn and partially rewritten to swap in the two National Comics characters. And quite frankly, I would like to see that, the alternate universe version of this story, just to see how the Atom and Johnny Thunder dealt with the situation. Okay, so let's get into the story itself. There is a prologue in this story, and it is divided up into the various segments, which I will call chapters, just for ease of use here. But in the prologue of this particular issue, it says, it all began on a Western ranch the night Calvin Stimes played host to his 5 lifelong friends and fraternity brothers, all of whom were famous professional men. A peaceful and simple setting? Yes, but out of it grew something so monstrous, events so breathtakingly evil, that only the Justice Society of America, assisted by Superman and Batman, could meet the dark and dire threats. I love the hyperbole of this issue. And there is basically a roll call of headshots of everybody, with the Flash, Dr. Midnight, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Hawkman, and then Superman and Batman, who are assisting here, but they are featured most prominently at the top of each column. So I thought that was interesting as well. Okay, we'll get into the story proper. It opens with Calvin Stimes telling his fraternity brothers, who are Ed Finley, the country's, we're told, foremost private detective, Matt Matwell. Well, they really were stretching their faculties with that name. Anyway, he's a reporter. Saul Philpotts, a scientist. Archie Erdner, an archaeologist. And finally, Ben Stanley, an architect. Stimes tells them about the legend of the, and I'm just going to pronounce it this way, Kohaha. I tried to figure out how that should be pronounced, but I'm just, maybe it's Kohaha. I don't know, but I'm just going to call it Kohaha. Otherwise known as the stream of ruthlessness. Quote, anyone who drowns doesn't die. Kohaha washes away a man's better nature. It leaves him completely ruthless. While Stimes is speaking, we are shown a few panels, presumably from the previous time the stream drowned a Native American and perhaps is the origin of the legend in 1747. Some of the details of this story are a little wishy-washy. I try to determine which tribe is depicted here, but really the visual is that of, forgive me for this term, Indians of the time, nearly naked and wearing a feather band. Because of the later Infinity Inc. story that placed the source of the Kohaha near Fall Springs, Colorado, a town near a snowy mountain range, my uneducated guess would be Arapaho, Cheyenne, Shoshone, or Ute. Is it Ute or Ute nations? Stimes guesses that the reason the Old West was so bloody was because of the last time the stream appeared, which would be 1847, because Flash in Infinity Inc. number 5 confirms the story takes place in 1947. An interesting premise, but how many men would have had to have drowned in Kohaha for that to make sense? Of course, we don't know how long the stream flows every 100 years. Perhaps it's for weeks or months. Regardless, this supposition is extremely suspect, but it's presented more or less as fact in the story. The men then reveal how they might be evil if they were under the stream's influence, essentially setting up what's to come with them. Afterward, they settle in for the night in the stream bed, except for Stimes, who says he'll sleep better further up the bank. Not at all suspicious. Ben observes that Stimes still stutters pretty badly and tells him they're all sorry about an incident in college. Stimes tells Ben that it doesn't bother him. I like the art in this scene. It's mostly colored in yellow and orange for the campfire light, with a dark purple background. And I should note, I'm reading this mostly. Most of my notes are taken based on the digital version from DC Universe Infinite, but I did also compare it to the reprint in the DC Digest that I mentioned earlier. Hours later, the men are awoken to the rumbling of rushing water and their cries for help are silenced. Stimes appears on the bank saying, quote, after all these long years, at last, it's begun! All right, Chapter 1, which I'm calling Roll Call! It's 3 days later, and the assembled JSAers, Hawkman, who is chairman, it is noted, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, secretary, Flash, and Dr. Midnight are reading the paper. Hawkman observes that Al Pratt, a.k.a. the Atom, was injured in a basketball game the previous night. Wonder Woman spies in the personal column that Johnny Thunder is sick and has asked Superman directly to take his place at this very meeting, which somewhat annoys the Flash. We are told in the caption box at the bottom of the page that Superman and Batman will step in to help the JSAers with the, quote, rash of strange and explosive new crimes that have rocked the country end to end. This means that the JSA now has a full complement of valiant warriors to throw against their most dangerous foes in a decade, the 5 drowned men. Really? A PI reporter, maybe the scientist, archaeologist, and architect are the most dangerous they've faced in a decade? Given that the JSA first published in 1940, so it's not even been a decade, but, comic book time. But they have battled fifth columnist Nazis, Brainwave, and other superpowered menaces. So this claim is a bit hyperbolic, I think. Regardless, Superman does arrive, as does Bruce Wayne, who tells them that he just came in from the bedside of his friend Al Pratt and wanted to get someone to take Al's place. He leaves, and soon Batman arrives. So that leads me to ask, do Al and Bruce know each other's identities? Or is it that Bruce knows Al's and Al is aware that Bruce knows Batman? We also see that the JSA doesn't think too much of Bruce Wayne until Batman shows up. Hawkman calls the meeting to order, and Wonder Woman reads the letter they received the day before. To the Justice Society of America, the recent amazing crimes are not the work of criminals. They have been committed by 5 so-called respectable men. These men are the men that I noted earlier. You've no time to lose. The crime careers of these men are just beginning. Act fast for the sake of justice. Signed, a well-wisher. I love Superman's somewhat naive reaction, but those 5 men are at the very top of their professions. Why would they turn to crime? It was apparently a simpler time. Also, I find the lack of a nail on Wonder Woman's thumb in a couple panels to be a little creepy looking. No, it's just a stupid little detail, but it's like, ooh, those are weird fingers. She also shows a newspaper clipping from 2 days before describing how 5 drowned men came back to life. It's noted that they were submerged for 12 hours. This means that the 5 men, after coming back to life, managed to get home all across the country, and presumably that's where the crimes are taking place, and commit all those crimes, all within 2 days. Maybe Kohaha also gave them the power of super efficiency or something, because that's amazing. The JSAers announce which man they'll go after, and Wonder Woman gives them Amazonian mental radios. Green Lantern tells Wonder Woman that he's going to look for Stimes. When Batman announces he's going after the PI and Hawkman the archaeologist, I thought it was a missed opportunity to not have Superman go after the reporter instead of the architect, and the Flash after the scientist instead of the reporter. Though Dr. Midnight taking the scientist also works for me. Speaking of missed opportunities, Wonder Woman stays behind. I've read that Kanigher didn't like writing Wonder Woman later, or maybe even now, I don't know. So did this discrimination start here? Or is it that women, even Wonder Women, couldn't be shown doing, man's work back then? I would bet money that if I go read other JSA stories previous to this, that Wonder Woman probably did not do a whole lot in terms of the crime solving stuff. But, I could be wrong about that. So I'm going to have to go listen to and read a bunch of the JS April submissions to see if there's any other kind of information about this. All right, Chapter 2, we begin the hunt with Batman versus the Grim Marauder. It's a day later, and Bruce Wayne is in the Midwestern metropolis of Zenith, attending a party. Ed Finley tells Mr. Aardman that his wife's black pearls, which cost Aardman a cool $500,000, will be safe from the Grim Marauder because he's on the case. Bruce Wayne greets his old acquaintance, Finley, who asks Bruce what he's doing there. After Bruce tells him it's regarding a business matter, Finley excuses himself. Bruce wonders about how cold Finley's hand was when he shook it. Like a dead man's, Bruce muses. What could that mean, I wonder? World's greatest detective, indeed. What I really like about the setup is not the party panels, but the introductory panel showing the Grim Marauder leaping out a window and effectively bouncing off a telephone pole onto the adjacent building with the pearls in hand. It's a panel that's also shown later, but this is a nicely detailed drawing of that later panel. And each of these vignettes use that title panel, I'll call it, to introduce each section. I thought that was a really neat way to transition to each one. Shortly after, we see Finley changing his clothes, becoming the Grim Marauder. He notes that by dressing himself in a mask, scarf, white gloves, and heel lifts is a simple but effective disguise. He also lets us know that he relies on surprise and quick action instead of an elaborate plan like other criminals. He then makes his appearance at the party demanding the pearls, but Batman interrupts the theft and they fight. The Grim Marauder knows how to turn the fight to his advantage, against Batman and makes his getaway. Finley doesn't mention the dark green fedora he wears that we see in the panel. And in the digital version of the comic book, as well as the reprint in the DC Special Blue Ribbon Digest, his gloves are green. So I don't know if the original had white gloves, or it just, somebody just did not read the text or something. I don't know. It's just again, one of those little funny details that calls attention to itself. It does have me wondering, does he disguise his voice as well? Because he just talked to the guy who paid all that money for the Black Pearls, and then he comes in and announces himself as the Grim Marauder. Give me the pearls, right? So, it's the thing, like it's just like with Batman or any of the superheroes, right? Anyway, Batman pursues him, supposing that since Finley disappeared when the Grim Marauder did, gee, I wonder where Bruce Wayne went. They must be one and the same. When he bursts into Finley's office, the specially prepared trapdoor Finley had installed sends Batman 30 feet into the basement. With Batman stunned, Finley ties him up and confesses that since he drowned, he figured he could make millions as a crook. When Batman protests, telling him he can't win this way, Finley informs him that the rope around his neck is wet rawhide, and when it dries, Batman can figure out the rest. So that left me wondering, did Finley install the trapdoor after he was drowned? Did he figure that eventually someone would come for him, which seems logical given his vocation? As for the rawhide, this is one of those comic book bits of trivia I loved reading about when I was younger. Well, still do, actually. I would often repeat things like this that I'd learned in comics and be extremely satisfied when an adult would look at me quizzically, asking where I learned it. Comic books, I say, triumphantly. After Finley leaves, Batman considers his predicament when he spies someone coming toward him with a knife. This person throws the knife at the support beam Batman is tied to, telling him in a stuttering voice, "Things aren't as bad as they seem." Batman uses the knife to free himself, but the stuttering man is gone. He confronts Finley again, catching him by surprise, and as he apprehends the thief, he is contacted by Wonder Woman. He races from the building with Finley, telling him he's going to the last place in the world he'd expect. In this last scene, it's interesting that the artist disguises the stuttering man's face in shadow as if that would keep the reader guessing as to his identity. Speaking of Stimes, was he staking out Finley's office so when whichever Justice Society member arrived, he could help them just in case? All right, Chapter 3, Flash versus Mr. X. At a political rally in Snow City for gubernatorial candidate Rex Garden, a film showcasing his career is cut short when someone smashes the projector after a picture of Garden and another man appears. That night, Garden receives a phone call from Mr. X, which ends with X warning Garden to follow his instructions. Garden then leaves the next day, Election Eve, for Snow Mountain. It's after that the Flash arrives in Snow City and, after hearing a paperboy hawking the news about Garden's retreat, decides to investigate. As he races to Snow Mountain, the Flash wonders if there's a connection between reporter Matt Matwell and the mysterious Mr. X. Meanwhile, Mr. X has arrived and confronts Garden. Garden gives Mr. X the $10,000 blackmail money for keeping Garden's secret. Mr. X tells Garden that once he's governor, he'll expect monthly favors. Garden, however, resists, saying he'd rather die first. Mr. X clobbers the candidate and is about to shoot him when Flash arrives, saving Garden. I love how the incident at the rally is just glossed over. Because it's clearly Garden who smashes the projector in that panel. And the coincidence that Flash arrives moments after X has arrived to take his money. Comics. Regardless, where's the logic in killing the supposed golden goose? And I guess that Garden is polling very well if X believes he'll be able to get monthly goodies from the candidate. Perhaps Garden is a well-respected state representative or judge turning his eye towards the governorship. After all, he is referred to as the Honorable Rex Garden at the rally. The Flash and X fight, with X knocking Flash to the ground. The Ace of Acceleration kicks X into a tree, but X is kicked so hard that he rebounds off the tree, hitting Flash in the jaw and knocking him out. X ties both Flash and Garden up and leaves them on a toboggan run. Yes, a toboggan run. When Flash comes to, he asks Garden what X has on him, which that his brother was an executed murderer and Garden is a fake name he took on to avoid that association, one which would prevent him from becoming governor. Oh, the wistful days of political altruism. As a toboggan barrels towards them, Flash vibrates so fast that he melts the snow around the two, allowing them to be safely passed over. When they untie themselves, Garden tells Flash he'll tell his supporters who he really is, and Flash will help support him. But then he's off to find Mr. X. It still astonishes me to this day to what lengths the creators of these comics would go to level the playing field between ordinary criminals and superpowered heroes. If the Flash had kicked X that fast into the tree, or with such force, I guess, I'm not sure, but the way it's shown, it seems like there's a lot of force involved with this kick. That would be the end of the story, because there's no way a human could hit a tree like that and not just collapse to the ground. But X bounces off the tree with a boing sound effect, which still obviously makes me laugh. Maybe it was a rubber tree. Oh, boy. And there's the toboggan run. We see a toboggan coming toward Garden and Flash, and it's maybe, perspective and all that, but in the panel, it looks like it's maybe 12 feet away at that time. But they have enough time to have a conversation and then Flash to melt the snow before the toboggan arrives. Flash follows Mr. X's ski trail, but it stops suddenly, and Mr. X speaks to Flash from a tree branch above. Just as he's about to shoot Flash, X's gun is shot away by someone nearby. Flash catches X and unmasks him to reveal that it's Matt Matwell. Flash also receives a mental radio message from Wonder Woman, and he then tells Matwell that he's taking him to the JSA headquarters. Before Flash speeds away with Matwell, he ponders the crazy appearance of the stuttering man who helped him, thinking, I wonder who on earth he could be. I don't understand the need to keep up this mystery. Surely comic book readers in 1947 weren't, that dumb that they, couldn't figure out who that was. Anyway, on to Chapter 4, Hawkman versus the Black Rider. In New Mexico, Professor Alvin Doty writes a letter telling his wife that they have just discovered the ancient Aztec temple of Tlaloc? Tlaloc? It's Tlaloc. I'm just going to say Tlaloc. He mentions that secrecy is vital because the Black Rider has been terrorizing other dig sites. His epistolary task is interrupted by the Black Rider himself, who takes Doty's notes. Okay, just because I like doing this, first of all, there are no Aztec ruins in New Mexico, unless perhaps there are on Earth too. So, it's possible. Second, I go back to my statement about the timing of this whole thing. Is a few days enough time for all this Tomb Raidering and to be known, and for the Black Rider to be terrorizing multiple digs? It doesn't work, does it? Hawkman arrives and hears Doty's injured moaning. And Doty leads Hawkman to the Tlaloc entrance, and they confront Black Rider and his men. Hawkman takes out one of the thugs, but Black Rider gets a lucky right cross in, knocking Hawkman to the ground. Hawkman kicks Black Rider away, but the villain is able to knock the feathered fighter out by using a pickaxe. Black Rider has his men place both Hawkman and Doty on a sacrificial table, and then they leave with the treasures. The way the fight goes off with Hawkman is almost exactly like what happens with Flash, including the punch and kick situations, only without the comical sound effects. It's funny, too, that these villains seem willing to kill anyone, but they won't do it easily. They have to arrange an interesting death. Again, comics. Hawkman comes to and is able to stop the automated sacrifice. He flies off without Doty to confront the Black Rider. He enters the main tent and falls for a decoy dummy, while the Black Rider, a.k.a. Archie Erdner, holds Hawkman at bay with a pistol. Erdner is about to pull the trigger when several men arrive to subdue him. They tell him they were sent by a stuttering man to help. It's then that Hawkman receives a message from Wonder Woman, and he too takes Erdner to JSA headquarters. Okay, again, I know it's comics, but I'm still going to point it out anyway. How does Stimes get around so fast? He was just in an alpine area and then in New Mexico. To be fair, I guess he could have called those men to tell them to help from that alpine area. Speaking of those heroes, they sure look like they are drawn or designed by Jack Kirby. Okay, Chapter 5, Dr. Midnight versus the Gold Thief. In an eastern bank. So, New Mexico, now an eastern bank. Bags of gold float out of the vault and out through an open door. That evening, Dr. Midnight is at the police commissioner's office discussing the case. The commissioner thinks they're dealing with a gang of invisible men. Midnight thinks not and asks for a solid gold coin to use as bait, which the commissioner obliges. I now want to know if gold coins were ever actually stored in bags as depicted in this issue, like big, huge bags of gold coins. It's just absurd that those huge bags of gold just float through the air. I mean, they have to be heavy. I also wonder if many of the Golden Age heroes were chummy with their respective police commissioners. So I guess I can thank Batman for that template. And I realize this is not necessarily Dr. Midnight's usual haunt. I'm not entirely certain. Do they actually? I don't think that they identify where exactly this is. So, Dr. Midnight just goes to the police commissioner and the police commissioner just gives him a gold coin and works with him. I know. I'm being really picky for a comic that was produced in 1947. Regardless, as Dr. Midnight surmises the crime to be the work of a scientific genius, which, I have to admit, yeah, I kind of go with him on this one. The gold coin tugs at his fingers, leading him to a rooftop and an open skylight. When he enters the room below, he recognizes Philpotts. The now evil scientist throws a pot of liquid gold on Midnight and then turns on his gold magnet, which pulls Midnight toward it. Just then, Stimes pours turpentine from the skylight above onto Midnight, washing the gold off. Midnight grabs Philpotts and receives a message from Wonder Woman. Dr. Midnight must be on par with Sherlock Holmes and or Batman, given his logical leap about what was happening regarding the gold. And did he fight mostly evil scientists back then? At first, I laughed at the gold magnet, as I just did. I laugh about it every time I think about it. But gold, I found, actually is magnetic, though its magnetic field is very, very weak. So maybe this does prove that Philpotts is a genius if he was able to produce a device that somehow attracted gold as if it were iron. And don't get me started about, the liquid gold here. Gold melts at nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, so it would have killed Midnight had it been poured on him in the way that it was depicted in the panel. And if that didn't, the turpentine bath would have helped, for sure. It seems like it's more like gold paint, or it should have been honey, or I don't know. It was just odd. I do feel bad for Philpotts. He's the only one of the drowned men who doesn't get a villain name. Chapter 6, Superman versus the Wrecker. Superman arrives in Centropolis to see a skyscraper explode. He quickly rebuilds the skyscraper and then surmises that the Wrecker will try again. Stimes hands him a note directly, which tells Superman to find out the name of the architect who designed the skyscraper. So, how far away from Metropolis do you think Centropolis is? Is there a Westropolis? I know, it doesn't, Metropolis, we just know is in the east, but Centropolis. Anyway, there is a city by this name in Kansas, actually, though it does not have any skyscrapers. In fact, the 2020 census counts only 100 residents. I like how, as each of these stories progress, Stimes is more visible and interactive with each succeeding hero. Superman heads to the Daily Record newspaper morgue, and then after heads to the wrecker's next target, the Merton Trust Building. He confronts the wrecker, aka Ben Stanley, as he's about to light some dynamite. As Superman goes to apprehend Stanley, the architect throws a stick of dynamite at the Man of Steel. Superman suppresses the explosion within his hands and then tussles with the wrecker's men briefly before apprehending Stanley and receiving Wonder Woman's message to return to the JSA headquarters. So I know they had to include Stimes in some way in this particular chapter, but Superman is an investigative reporter, so I'm sure he didn't need the help. And it is interesting that Superman goes to the city newspaper instead of City Hall, but maybe it was after hours. Maybe the city morgue, newspaper morgues had more information like this. I don't know. It just seems like if you're going to look up building information, that would be something not at a newspaper. Although I guess there would be reports about the new building in the newspaper. Anyway, maybe I was thinking about it all wrong when I wrote these notes. Chapter 7, Green Lantern versus the Stuttering Man. After Superman arrives at the JSA HQ, Wonder Woman escorts Stanley into a room with the other drowned men and locks the door. She explains that Green Lantern was the first to report back in, causing her to message everyone and direct them back to the HQ. Green Lantern then tells the assembled heroes what he discovered. In the Midwestern town of Millville, maybe it's close to Centropolis, Green Lantern inquired of Stimes' whereabouts, but no one had seen him since the accident. He luckily spied someone taking Stiles' mail and followed the man to a log cabin. When he entered, he's hit over the head, with what looks like a log, which makes sense for Green Lantern, and he's knocked out. When he came to, he found himself tied up in front of a fireplace with Calvin Stimes pointing a shotgun at him. Stimes then recounted what he had against his 5 fraternity brothers. Okay, I have to imagine that, power ring or not, Green Lantern has to be feeling the heat, literally, from that raging fire shown in that scene. Seems like he would be, burned, or his costume would be burning. Anyway. I'll forgive, or, ignore the coincidence of Green Lantern seeing Stimes at his mailbox, but I do appreciate how Stimes helps Green Lantern here, as he did with the other heroes. Or maybe I have it all wrong and this was part of Stimes' plan all along. Maybe he needed to spill his guts as to his motivation. Which is this. Back in college, the 5 fraternity brothers decided to get even with Stimes because they believed he had poisoned their dog, Brownie. I assume the fraternity pet. They did so by painting another dog with luminous paint and letting it into Stimes' bedroom to haunt him. When they entered Stimes' room after a little bit, they discovered his hair had turned completely white and he now stuttered. At the time, Stimes wrote it off as a fraternity gag and basically admits to killing the fraternity pet. But his stuttering prevented him from pursuing a career as a criminal lawyer and vowed to make them all pay. 20 years later, he learned of the stream of ruthlessness and set his trap. Hearing enough, Green Lantern used his ring to bend the shotgun barrel. After he untied himself, Green Lantern looked for Stimes but could not find him, so he came directly to the JSA HQ to divulge what he knew. To which I have to ask, Alan, you can use your ring to bend the shotgun but not zap the rope. Not to mention just flying around the woods to locate Stimes. But, plot. Wonder Woman enters the room that holds the drowned men to discover they are gone. She's concerned that Stimes will actually try to kill them now. Green Lantern musters all his willpower to illuminate footprints and track the escapees. Perhaps Green Lantern's failure to find Stimes in the woods gave him this idea? Meanwhile, Stimes is back at Kohaha because he knows his former friends will be drawn there to drink from the waters again, and he set another trap for them. Once they arrive, Stimes sets off an explosion, but the JSA members arrive just then and rescue the drowned men. Before they can arrest Stimes, the cavern where he hid collapses, killing him. Later, Flash analyzes the Kohaha water and announces it, quote, contains an amazing amount of free oxygen. That must be why no one can actually drown in it, because drowning means cutting off the oxygen supply. He also detects, quote, strong traces of a rare drug, Habis indica. Dr. Midnight states he's heard of it and how it, quote, deadens a man's conscience so he loses his sense of right or wrong. Flash creates an antidote to give the drowned men. Later, all the men want to stand trial for what they did and make amends. Wonder Woman tells them the JSA will testify on their behalf and that the courts will accept a plea of temporary insanity. Superman then pushes a large amount of stone into the stream, blocking its waters. Batman says the stream of ruthlessness will never again threaten the world. And so this is the part of the story where I had the most fun researching. I just had to look up free oxygen and Habis indica. It turns out that free oxygen is a real thing, but it really is only beneficial if you have gills. About the drug, I couldn't find anything directly called Habis indica. I'm guessing that this is a Comics Code friendly, sly way to refer to cannabis indica, which can be used to make hashish. Also, Habis in Turkish means pernicious, so that also works. I think that's quite clever on Kanigher's part. And Batman's assertion is indeed wrong because rascally Roy Thomas and company revisited the stream of ruthlessness years later in Infinity Inc. in the Generation Saga, which were the first 10 issues of that series. The Ultra Humanite lures the JSA back to the Kohaha waters and drowns them, turning Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Hawkman, Atom, and Robin ruthless. And it's up to the Infinitors to rescue them. Okay, that is all I have for All-Star Comics number 36. I hope you didn't mind my poking a little loving fun at this story. I've always had a fondness for this, my first Golden Age story that I ever read. When I first read Five Drowned Men, I had no idea what Golden Age even meant in the context of comic books. I just knew it was an old story and that the JSA preceded the Justice League, because Superman told me so on the cover of that DC Digest. But it was this story and the others in that digest, All-Star Comics 58 and 59, and the DC First Issue Special number 9, that began my love for the Justice Society of America, a love that endures to this day. In fact, one of my favorite DC characters of all time is Hourman, which of course was not in this, but as I read other stories involving the JSA, I just really like the idea of a guy who takes a drug and has superpowers for an hour. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this portion of the JS April event, or even if you didn't, be sure to check out all the other entries. Look for the JSA April hashtag on social media, as I said before, and also visit fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril for a complete listing of all podcasts and blogs celebrating the world's first super team. If you have feedback for me about this issue, my comments about it, please send feedback to longboxreview@gmail.com. You can leave voicemail or text me at 208-953-1841, or you can contact me via social media at longboxreview. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.